Hello everyone, it's Stefan here. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the extroverted thinking function. So this is a cognitive function in the MBTI. So there's 8 cognitive functions and one of them is extroverted thinking. So mainly we're going to talk about metrics, data, and being a rule maker. If you ever encounter an extroverted thinker, majority of times you'll see a few clues and this involves metrics, data, and being a rule maker. So we'll continue on. Okay, so the cognitive function of extroverted thinking. So T sees reality through the lens of hard numbers and measurable outcomes. They have um, so a lot of T users like to track data, mainly because they can see which is the best performing metrics, and then they try to optimize. This is even though you might not be a TE user, I do recommend that other people do use metrics as well. It's very useful, but mainly TE users, they like to look at data and resources. Okay, continuing on, there's a clear cause and effect relationship of what leads to an outcome. So what inputs leads to outputs. So this is mainly in marketing and sales. A lot of TE users try to have a goal, which is maybe to increase their revenue or increase sales or try to target a specific client. And so that involves a lot of TE trying to classify certain positioning that you will target individuals. So, for example, when I did my AI business, a lot of what my inputs were trying to get leads. How would I phrase when I try to get a client? What would be the first point of contact? How would I phrase it so that they would be interested in having a call with me or messaging back to me? So this is mainly with due to the cause and effect relationship. So I can tie what I say to what outcome I'm going to get. So T users tend to prioritize efficiency over emotion. This is mainly the TJs, which is ISTJs, INTJs, ESTJs, and ENTJs. They also prefer structure within chaos. So they prefer a bit of organization with goal making. Okay, so another trait of extroverted thinkers is they tend to be a high speed mental compression. So they tend to be the quickest thinkers. TI users, which is introverted thinkers, they tend to be the best thinkers, but extroverted thinkers tend to be the quickest. So they can absorb competing ideas, they filter, strip away the noise and nonsense, and summarize into one clear truth. All in seconds, T doesn't overthink, it weighs out different thoughts. So by gathering different perspectives, they can sort of have a probability of what is most likely to be true from just past experience or past truths. And so this really allows T users to respond to information very quickly. Even I would say in terms of unknown information, T users tend to do better, which is why I say they're the quickest thinker. Whereas introverted thinkers, they tend to need facts to base their logic, or they need to have thought of something beforehand. So they tend to be long-term visionaries. True TE minds play the long game, see how systems compound over time. So understand how actions scale, predict consequences of thought well ahead, read human reaction patterns through predictive thoughts. So mainly seeing how systems compound over time, that's something that TE users naturally do. They can sort of tie in how a bunch of different compartments of a system add up together, and they can play around and try and have a final output based on the inputs. Understand how actions scale. That's another thing with TE users. They care about scale, which is a little bit of input to a large amount of output. Predict consequences of thought well ahead. This is a big one. I think a lot of people don't really understand about extroverted thinkers, that they can sort of understand how people are going to think, and which results in us kind of giving information to try and prevent TI users from going down the wrong pathway. I think a lot of TI users don't care about what they think, and they don't realize the negative consequences. Like, I understand TI users have an agenda, which is to get a certain outcome that is good for them, or like leads to a problem being solved, but how they say it, that can result into future problems. So one example is, if you're in the MBTI community, you probably have heard of C.S. Joseph. C.S. Joseph, he says a lot of truths, but the problem is how he speaks and the consequences, because he does speak, he does get the truth a lot, but in the event that he's actually wrong, there's a lot of negative consequences, which leads to less people being interested in the psychology. Because it's good that you can say the truth, but you need to be equally offensive to everyone. I think if you say the truth and you're just targeting individual or certain types, that can just lead to people being isolated. Okay, lightning fast computation. So this is again about the quickest thinker. So they can absorb chaos, incoming information sorted instantly. It's amazing to watch how their brain works, where they can just classify certain problems or big level questions that need to be solved in a situation. They identify structure, patterns emerge from disorder, and then they find the correct path. So real-time recalculation when data shifts. So when new info drops, TE weighs, that's wrong now, here's what's right. So a good example of fast computation is Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. So these guys are chess players who compute faster than anyone. So these are the top two players. They're both INTJs, and so they have extroverted thinking parent, which allows them to process information much more quicker than pretty much most people that play chess. This is largely due to so much repetition that they can sort of predict how they can respond to certain situations, how they can solve. If they've solved a situation in a chess endgame in a similar manner, they can sort of back their own ability. So if you ever watch them play, you can see how quickly they change their mind. Like Hikaru is always saying, this is a good move, or he's behind. And then the next move, he just flips and he's forgotten that what he said previously. Okay, so T versus TI, the speed difference. So extroverted thinkers, they're the quickest thinker on the board, process externally. So they're more about external thoughts. So they adapt instantly to new information. They're always scanning for new information or what could be true. Whereas introverted thinkers can be kind of blind, where they just kind of ignore what information is out there. So they're focused on what works now, partly due to the ability to predict what new information would be. Okay, so that's another thing with T users. They can sort of predict what questions to ask or where to kind of find the truth, which is why they tend to ask a lot of questions, because they're quite efficient with figuring out the main points. So another thing with extroverted thinkers, there's an abstract component about it, where they can sort of even understand what people are saying without them explicitly saying it. So even if someone communicates in the wrong way, they can still with their T kind of understand what they mean. So that's something that you have to be a bit aware of. So introverted thinking, that's the best think on the board. So these guys are dubbed the smartest type. So they process internally, they build frameworks methodically, focus on what's logically consistent. Now, TI can appear a quick thinker if they have already processed thoughts before. Okay, so if they've already calculated what they think is true or had made this argument before, they can appear as a quick thinker, especially in debates. But if it's a new environment or something that they haven't heard before, they can sort of be a bit slow to figure out what is true. So don't confuse speed with accuracy. Both are brilliant, just different tools. Okay, so rule makers and educators. Okay, so TE doesn't just follow rules, it builds them. Okay, so these are mainly in your country. TE users are mainly the people responsible for creating rules. This can be an issue because a lot of times they create rules that for their own benefit, which when you say that, a lot of people will start to judge the T users as really selfish, but the truth is every type does it. So mainly with the top two functions, whichever one's the extroverted function, they all are responsible for trying to shift reality into the way that they want. Mainly it's to prevent sort of negative situations or prevent disorder. But then it also diverges into types trying to create rules for their own benefit. So define what's proper and efficient. They establish frameworks for truth, push civilization's education forward, teach people to think better, work smarter. Okay, so the masters of marketing and sales. Okay, so T users excel at persuasion. They understand the cause and effect of words and speaking. They know which phrases trigger action, how to frame offers for maximum impact, when to push, when to pull back, how to close deals with precision. So this is kind of Alex Hormozy. So if you've watched any of his content, he's all about trying to give people advice on how to increase sales or how to get leads or how to market. And a lot of it has to do with cause and effect, which is with how you phrase your offer, which is if you read his book, there's a lot of useful information. I think something that is quite undervalued. I think TI users don't really understand the T side of persuasion and what they're trying to achieve. But really, it's just trying to get an outcome, and they understand how certain causal nature of what they say or how words are phrased can lead to an outcome that they want. Okay, so T users, they dive deep into the thoughts of others. They can map how someone else thinks. Really, it just comes from just listening over time, and then you can sort of be aware that same people have the same thoughts, or you realize that they've listened to someone else that you've listened to, so you know exactly where they're going to go with this. So they speak on behalf of groups as well, so they can articulate ideas that others struggle to express, translating messy thoughts into clarity. So the thing about TE is very contextual. So if there's situations that people might be thinking, but they haven't really fleshed it out, it's just at the back of their mind, and then a T user speaks up, and then everyone else starts to agree that I've also had I've been in this situation as well. So something like the type community, I think if I speak up, I think a lot of people are really happy with what Chase has done, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, or sometimes it could be too TI heavy, whereas the MBTI community, I think it needs to prioritize other functions as well instead of just the truth. So T users, they tend to bridge communication gaps, especially useful when concepts are complex or hard to verbalize. So this is kind of why I kind of created this channel as well. It was more so for the people that are probably new to MBTI. I think it's gotten a bit too complicated, but it's had to be because there was a lot of misinformation, and it was turning into astrology, where everyone thinks they're a certain type, or they think that they can change types, which isn't true. But now it's too complex that people have dived into their own different realities. So you will see the main content creatives in the MBTI, they're kind of saying what you want them to, what the viewers want to hear. It's not really the truth. And so I kind of want to bridge the communication gap and give people the truth, but also make it so it's easier to understand. Okay, so the T advantage. So I just put a number: processing speed, filters ideas faster than most. So if someone talks, they can really learn really quickly from other people if they have a basic understanding, and then they can abstract what is going to the main points. This really happens when I listen to YouTube videos. A lot of times, especially if I know what they're talking about, I can listen to like a first probably like 30 seconds, and I already know what the conversation is going to be. I know all the talking points, what's the main ideas. It's because I think in these days a lot of people just repeat what other people are saying as well, so it's quite easy to predict. Scalability, they see how outcomes compound, and then clear truth, distill reality into results. So this is kind of an intro into extroverted thinking. I've probably only spoken about 25% of the function, but for now, because I started my channel, I'm just going to keep pushing out videos until I get better and then improve. And then, so thank you guys.